I'm sorry, it was my own fault. Sitting outside in the garden, I think the MacBook got too hot.
No problem at all, mate. No problem at all. Well, welcome back anyway.
Thank you.
Serves you right for going out into the middle of nowhere and trying to live it up posh for a month, eh?
Not hot and bothered at all. Just
yeah. Okay, well, look, let's get on with it. So for everybody watching, apologies on the slight delay. We had a slight technical issue. Just to introduce myself and the show, it's the Global Network.life. I'm your host, as always, Greg Stockton. Every week, I try and invite on different guests, not necessarily just here in the UAE, but all over the world, to try and motivate, inform, and inspire you, especially during these, I guess what some would say, uncomfortable times, or interesting times, or times that we're going to learn from for a long time to come. So today I'm obviously delighted to have a very special guest with us, Chairman of the BBG, John Martin St. Valery, who joins us from, where are you actually based right now as we speak, John?
I'm actually out at the Melia Desert Palm Resort, you know, the Polo and Equestrian Club.
Yeah.
I'm very, very fortunate to be here with a bit of outdoor space, apart from my laptop getting too hot outside. Because normally we live in town and don't have the outdoor space, but before the lockdown came into force in full, some friends of ours that live here say, why don't you come and stay up here for a while? And so my wife Karen and I are up here, so we're very fortunate.
Yeah, I think you definitely made a good move there. I was saying to you about 5 weeks ago when people said, where do you live? I was quite proud to say in an apartment facing the Burj Khalifa, the Opera House, and now I've given a little bit of outdoor space. So I'm extremely jealous. For everybody that is on this Zoom Hangout, just a little bit from a format perspective, I'm probably going to spend about maybe 15, 20 minutes just going through a few questions that have been on my mind for John. But obviously, I'm interested to find out, you know, what you guys would like to ask as well. So on the Zoom Hangout, there's a chat box down the bottom. If you've got any questions at all that you want me to fire over to John, please feel free to type them out in there directly to myself. And then once me and John have gone through the Q&A, I'll deal with your questions and he'll try and answer them as well as possible. So yeah, John, have we still got you there? We're good?
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah, hanging in.
Okay, cool. All right, let's crack on then. So obviously, I've known you for a little while now. I know you've come onto our business podcast through Benapol with the Blue Sky Thinking Group, which was a really insightful look at the UAE. I think one thing that we didn't actually touch on though is like what's been your journey here in the UAE. So can you just give us a little background about when you got here, what you were doing when you got here, and what path you've taken to become the chairman of BBG and also chairman of, I think it's Jackson MSV as well, which is your sort of family business there. So yeah, if you just give us that background, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, sure, Greg. Well, it's a while back now, but it's summer '98 that my wife and I moved here with the young kids as they were at the time, and I came across to Dubai to open a branch for a UK-based financial services business, and it was their first branch overseas, and it was quite an interesting experience. All sort of elbows down at the ministries and departments trying to find out what to do. You know, I had no network here. I was tasked with getting the central bank license, as it was at the time. There was no DIFC or free zones or anything like that. So it was, the key thing was to try and build a network quickly for assistance. And I guess I struck lucky really, because in the early days I was invited along to one of these, as the sort of expats were at the time, I think some sort of cocktail party in the embassy ground. Just I thought, this is fantastic. I've been to an embassy before, this will be good. So we rocked up, and probably the best piece of advice that I was given in my whole journey in the UAE over the last 22 years was someone said to me, John, you should join the BBG. That's how you get a network. And I said, the BBG, what's this? So it's the British Business Group, Dubai and Northern Emirates. You know, we've been going for about 10 years, I think it was at the time. And it's the sort of group you can join. It's not just about networking, but it's about business introductions, perhaps opening doors for business opportunities. But to build your own network, if you need to meet or try and find a lawyer to retain, or auditors, or find out how to get your offices, and listen, join the BBG. So I did. Member 400 and something back in early part of 1999. And it's the BBG that gave me my network, gave me the ability to form that business, that branch of a foreign company. We built it up over a couple of years. We had 20 qualified and regulated consultants through central bank, etc., and a reasonable client base. We were responsible for the Middle East and Singapore. So that was fun, and it was the BBG that really gave that to me. So I was quite an active member, as you can imagine, over those first few years. Then that business, for a number of reasons, had to withdraw from this market, and that was in 2001, which was an interesting year for the globally, let alone for the Middle East. And so I was tasked by the board back in the UK to close the business down and wind it up. I think a lot of us know that can be more problematic or difficult than actually setting up a new business. But again, through contacts and negotiating with the business back home, I managed to get the ability to keep the team intact and actually sell the business on to an incoming independent financial advisory business from the Far East, who wanted to come into an existing platform.
Okay.
So I managed to go through that business, all the while still being a member of the BBG and getting involved. I sat on a committee in various positions, like director of membership and the event side for a while. But then to fast forward, cut a long story short, I only had about a year of a transition or integration with this business that had come in and bought the branch that I'd previously set up, and it gave continuous employment for the staff and everything like that. That was great, but I was never going to remain with them. That's not my sort of area of expertise. So it was great thinking time that year, and I thought, it's been quite difficult, as I say, elbows down at the ministries, etc., how to set up a business, let alone unwind one or restructure one. And I thought maybe there's an opportunity here to start my own business, helping other companies, initially British, but became international, other individuals or companies coming into the market, to give them a soft landing. And that's how some of our friends here on this webinar might will know about Links Group. And Links Group was my business that was established back in 2002. And fast forwarding again, I exited that business in 2016, or we became part of a global professional services firm back in 2016, and I finally exited the business last summer. So throughout that process of building, managing a business and exiting a business, the BBG has been part of my life. Yeah. And when 2017, I somewhat naively thought, I'm going to have quite a bit of bandwidth now. Maybe I'll go for the big boys job. And so we had a contested election that year, which was fun, because it's always good to have new blood coming into any organisation like that. And the members voted me in as chair in 2017, and it was my pledge then to lead the group up to, well, I said Expo 2020, but of course now it's likely Expo 2021. So that's been my role. That's been my journey over the last few years. I suppose from a personal perspective during that time as well, the two young kids I spoke about. Obviously, they both did about 10 years each of education here, then went off to either finish education or go to university, college, etc. Met their other halves, got married, came back, and so we've got the whole family very pleased. We're delighted. We've got the whole family back here, 3 grandchildren, and our kids in their other halves.
Nice, what a great journey. And obviously over that period of time, you've seen so many changes across the UAE, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I guess probably at the moment we're seeing one of the most interesting times that a lot of businesses and individuals have had to face here. You're kind of at the forefront, I guess, in the sense of the relationship you have with many different business owners, directors throughout the BBG. What sort of feedback have you been getting from businesses over the last sort of 4 or 5 weeks about how they are pivoting, given the current status quo in the UAE?
Great, it's a great question, Greg, and very broad. But if you look at the UAE, and let's say the Dubai local government, federal government for UAE, there've been a number of crises of different sorts over the past 20 plus years that I've witnessed. But this is something, this is global. So we're not alone. We all know that every part of the world is affected here. And there's an enormous social issue and protection of health, etc. But of course, business and economies are suffering as well, including the UAE. Now, what I'd say, and it's been really heartening actually, in just last week, we, at the BBGs, we've collaborated with BBG Abu Dhabi and BBG Dubai Northern Emirates, which I'm responsible for. Our teams have collaborated to get a membership, an in-depth membership survey out to our membership to really find out what those struggles are and what the key points that businesses and individuals are finding difficult from a business and an economic perspective. So it's very timely to ask the question, because that survey finished last Thursday. We reached out to 900 companies, 900 company members between the two groups. Probably about 70% of them Dubai Northern Emirates, 30% Abu Dhabi. That's the nature of our membership base. We got quite a good response, I think, from a survey perspective, about 18%, so that's just about 150 responses that have given us some really direct, raw data to work from. And this was done in conjunction with, you'll know the British Business Group in Dubai in particular is actually based within the embassy grounds here. So we work very closely with HMG, or Her Majesty's Government, different divisions, but particularly the Department for International Trade. So across the UAE, we've been working with British government, UK government, UAE government, both federal and local, and our membership to say what stimulus is required, what do these businesses really need. Now, something that was also very interesting from the survey coming back, those that responded, 50% of them were companies of less than 20 employees. Now, these businesses could collapse fast if they're not given proper cash stimulus. And I'm not talking about central banks or governments doing government or asset-backed loans to businesses. No, this is direct into probably the highest expense for any business over here, other than rent and property, and that's people, payroll, wages. There needs to be a salary stimulus, cash stimulus for payroll. And that's been now discussed at the most senior level from with the assistance of the BBG and other international business councils, incidentally, working together on this, making sure we're going up the stakeholder chain to ensure that, and the government are listening. You know, I've had some very interesting discussions myself at a level way up beyond my pay grade, but where the government recognise that the lifeblood of the business community here. I was speaking to actually a former client, but friends of mine who have a small business here in the, you're a very dapper chap, in the tailoring sector, Greg. I don't even come across them, Benjamin Siggers.
No, but thanks for the compliment of being dapper. Yeah.
No, I mean, he looked like a Siggers outfit. And we were talking to them about the Zoom suit. This is the new thing as far as tailoring is concerned. So the opportunities come out of this. Top half absolutely immaculate, but then we can perhaps go a bit more off-piste for the rest of it. Jokes aside, I think there are what the survey told us, and we're going to be sharing it with the wider community, and be delighted to share it through your
if you could, that'd be great.
Through this initiative as well, Greg. But there are the number of companies that didn't just whinge and moan, and some are pretty scared about the reality of their business failing. There's that side of it, and they need immediate support, which we're working on. But the other side of the coin, which was really heartening, was the number of businesses that are prepared to offer their product and services, on a FOC or pro bono basis if it assists the business community. Because, UAE, Dubai have shown their resilience in the past. They're resilient now, and I'm very bullish about when the recovery comes, without belittling what's actually happening at the moment, but when the recovery comes, it will be a hockey stick.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I've been amazed, and probably not unexpected, because I think just many people that work and live here in the UAE are fairly similar. They're ambitious, they're driven, they want their businesses to thrive, and it's been amazing to see how many business groups have come together to collaborate. Even businesses that I know that were once competitors, now come together for the sort of greater good of the industries that they're all working and trying to support. So I think that's been really, really powerful.
People have long memories as well. Sorry, cutting across you. People have memories. They'll remember how they were dealt with and treated by their peers, whether they're competitors or complementary businesses. And I think that's really important. That's back to the social side of this catastrophe, frankly, global catastrophe. you've got the social piece as well as the balance sheet.
Absolutely, and obviously the UAE, certainly from my perception, have been doing a fantastic job. I think we've been fairly much ahead of the curve comparative to other countries. Obviously, it's a shame about the movement of the Expo. I'm not sure if this came at probably a good time. I'm not even sure if they would have been ready. Would they have been ready? I don't know. What are you hearing about the sort of Expo movement?
Well, listen, you know, I'm a bit of an Expo junkie. I went to Shanghai in 2010, Milan in 2015, and on the build up to this one, I don't think anything's really been very different. It seems to be that it's a mad dash to the finish line. For the start in the 9 months leading up. So from January of the year of the Expo, it's bonkers. You know, it goes completely mad. And I remember, I think it's back in 2006, the Asian Games were held in Qatar. It's exactly the same thing. People would say, well, it's just, you know, you were there 3 months before. This isn't going to happen. It did happen. And I honestly believe Dubai and UAE will have delivered, but I think it will be even better next year, having that slight breathing space. But we can't take our foot off the throttle. But from a government perspective, they may wish to divert some of the expenditure into that enormous project this year into what's needed, you know, back to the cash stimulus for businesses. That will be the key focus. But you can bet this time next year we'll be saying, Greg, when we're out of this, inshallah, you know, through the recovery, everything going well, we'll say, oh, we'll never be ready for Expo. We will be. And it'll be fantastic.
And like you say, it'll certainly be one huge celebration considering what it will have taken to get there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I interviewed a guy a couple of weeks ago called Ryan Stramrud, who's an extreme swimmer. He does these crazy ice swims, and like, he's nuts. But you know, he was saying that when he swam the Channel, and he was comparing it to like the sort of Corona time we're in right now. He's like, you know, it's a 12-hour swim. And there's many times where you think, God, it's never going to end, it's never going to end, it's never going to end. And then when you sat on the beach at the end, you look back and go, that just went really quick. And he said, like, he's got the same kind of feeling with this. It's like at the moment, I think people have, you know, 3 or 4 weeks into lockdown, it's maybe feeling like it's starting to drag. But actually, you know, in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, however long we get back to some degree perceived normality, we'll look back and go, actually, that wasn't too bad.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think, you know, there are those with considerably more hardship than others as well, that will need that support to come out the other end. You know, joking earlier about, you know, having outdoor space and things like this, and a nice place to see it through. But many people haven't, and I think it's really important to make sure, then from a social perspective, whatever our nationalities or business groups that we, just generally as a community, I think we might come out of this a bit of a happier place than when we went in.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping in a romantic kind of way that the whole world comes out of it a little bit more connected than we ever have been. You know, it seems like it's the first time we've all been fighting the same war in one respect.
Yes, exactly.
Pulling together, which is nice. I'm interested in your opinion of when you feel, and again, I know it's just purely an opinion, but when you feel that the sort of Dubai, Abu Dhabi, UAE will start to get back to a little bit of normality. Obviously, we're in a 24-hour lockdown at the moment. When do you see that potentially lifting? Maybe a few restaurants or shops opening. Like, what's your sort of perceived timeline?
Yeah, I mean, it would only have to be, be irresponsible to say it's anything other than a personal opinion.
Yeah.
But from what I've seen, the strictness of the regulations that have come in, and things like the police permit app, you know, that's superb, and that just sort of appeared. And yeah, 24-hour lockdown is severe, but it's manageable. We can all manage that, and it's just been extended for this week, and we'll see next week what happens. I'm sure it will roll on further. But also, what I'm back to being quite bullish about the UAE, fairly confident about, Greg, is I think UAE are likely to be one of the first countries to come out of it. Now, I'm not talking about complete exit from lockdowns and things like that, but relaxations, because they've gone so hard, hard and fast on sanitization, lockdowns, etc. I think personally, I see that as being not just flattening the curve, but getting rid, which is the ideal situation. So, as you already surmised there, I haven't answered your question, but other than to say, there's a bit more pain to go. I would hope that by the midway through our long hot summer, we'll certainly be starting to see the green shoots of recovery.
Yeah, I agree. I think we will come out a bit quicker than a lot. I mean, look, the reality is we don't have a huge population of elderly people here comparative to other countries as well, which already limits a lot of that risk. I guess, you and I were at the events which you guys hosted probably a month and a half ago now, with the head of Dubai Airport.
Yeah.
Which is obviously a really interesting talk. And I guess that's probably the UAE going to be certainly Dubai's biggest, question mark or struggle is how do you sort of reopen the economy and then reopen what is the sort of international hub of, travel. Do you kind of open Dubai, but then like sort of leave the airport for a while, or how do you stop people going? That's got to be the biggest conundrum that they're going to have to figure out, right?
It will be, yeah, because it's all about mix of people, isn't it? And how they interact and what the touch points for the virus as we move forward. But yeah, that was quite incredible, wasn't it? We had Paul Griffiths there, speaking about Dubai airports and the government focus of keeping things going, whilst being safe and secure for as long as possible. But then literally a week later, it was.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest. When I was sat at that table, I was like, "He's been quite punchy," and then literally a week later, it was like bang, close.
Yeah.
But no, it was a fabulous speaker. I really enjoyed watching that.
Yeah, thanks. No, it was good to have you there because we try and do these sort of on a quarterly basis within the BBG, where we have a speaker that can be educative but also quite entertaining as well. The one before, I don't know if you came along, was Nick Leeson, the rogue trader.
I did. I was there with Nick.
Yeah, of course you were. That's right. Yeah, and so that was great fun.
I'm trying to get on this, actually.
Sorry,
I'm trying to get on this.
Yeah, we must do that when he next comes through as well. Actually, yeah. But I know, of course, you can do it from wherever. Can't you? Technology, yeah. I'm with you now. Keeping up.
So on a personal front, then, how are you keeping yourself sane and sort of motivated and driven whilst you're sat in that lovely villa? What are you doing on a day-to-day basis? How are you structuring your days?
Well, this question is sort of predicated on the fact I was saying to start with, Greg. But no, seriously, routine for me is really important. I mean, I don't have a 9 to 5 as such. Most of my work since exiting my own business has been more of a consultancy or non-exec type arrangement. So I've been fortunate that I've been able to really throw myself into this BBG and DIT, the Department for International Trade Initiative. So that's keeping me busy. Carolyn, my wife, was saying earlier, just try and chill out for a while. And I said, I do like to be busy, so and it's trying not to be busy doing nothing, but routine, a little bit of exercise, can't do any harm, and making sure the sun doesn't go over the yard arm too early in the late afternoon.
Nice. Yeah, it's funny. I was chatting to somebody the other day, and we were talking about, although I think the majority they're okay and they're still comfortable with what they're doing, there's still a lot of people moaning. I mean, you see what's going on in the US, people like now sort of protesting about having the lockdowns, which I get it, it's from a business perspective and they're worried about financials or whether they're just, I don't know. But, it's amazing how many people you'd speak to before this situation where they're like, you know what, I'm so sick of driving into the office in the morning, I'm stuck in traffic every day, I've got to go to work, I sit next to people I don't like. What I'd give just to have like a month or two at home. And then you get it, your prayers are answered, and then it's like, you don't like us anymore.
No, but it's very efficient though, isn't it? And this whole thing about technology. I mean, I hadn't been very familiar with Microsoft Teams or Zoom or anything like that before, like a lot of people. Some of the people I'm dealing with have been using it for ages. My own situation from a work perspective. My executive assistant, Denise, has been with me for years, was based here for a number of years, but she's actually been based in Amsterdam for a few years now. She's Dutch, but people wouldn't necessarily know that. We do everything electronically and through digital means. And that was one of the really interesting things that came out of the survey, where we wanted to sort of capture 3 points of interest or importance, and it was the cash flow piece, obviously, the reporting up the stakeholder chain to make sure government are assisting on both sides, but also not just the introduction, but the continued use of technology in our businesses and how it might reshape our business once we're out the other side as well. people say no, maybe more relaxed working, not so much working hours, but working locations. So working from home can become the norm. Some people are finding it far more productive.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I know a lot of businesses who have been speaking about this for a number of years, about going to a bit more of a relaxed workspace, work from home in the morning, to come in when you feel like you need to use the office. But I think there's always been this, I guess, probably fear from a management level of going, well, you keep everybody at home, they're going to be sat watching Netflix, they're not really going to be working, they're not really going to be productive. And actually, this has given a lot of businesses the opportunity to test it. And actually, I know, certainly speaking from my own business, I couldn't be prouder of how everyone's just got on with it. And in some cases, actually more productive than being in the office, where they're having, chat here, then after work, then chat.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that there will be a lot of companies that will come out of this and go, do we need 10,000 square foot of office space or 50,000 square foot of office space? Could it actually work in a different format? So it's going to be really interesting to see how businesses actually come back, and whether they keep that pivot. Before I ask you a final question, just for anybody that's still watching, and I don't think we've had anybody log off yet, which is good. If you do have any questions at all,
it's all family.
Yeah, if you do have any questions at all for John, please just drop them in the chat box so I can fire them out to you. Last question from me. Who's the most influential person that you've had contact with during this, and what have they been doing, either from a business perspective or personal perspective, that might be useful for somebody watching right now?
Well, that's a really interesting one, particularly being in lockdown with Mrs. MSV here. Obviously, she's the most influential person.
Of course, apart from that.
That's an interesting one, Greg, because I suppose in this project that I've been working on with, through the BBGs and DIT, etc. I mean, I've been exposed to some pretty senior government and ruling family members who are taking a very close interest here, and that. So from the Emirati side, I've been extremely impressed, and it's probably not right to name drop, but the people in position of being able to make a difference right at the top, I have found quite inspiring. And likewise, from the UK government perspective, the Ambassador, Consul General and Trade Commissioner, etc., we're fully on this. But maybe I was, if I just got a second, rather than the most influential, people that have been influences in my own journey, I suppose, that have been quite relevant for me, particularly in this lockdown period. I met a guy at a conference, he was the keynote speaker, years and years ago, called Nando Parada. I don't know if you've ever heard of Nando. This was out in Barcelona. He's a Uruguayan guy, he's about 70 now. But he was one of the rugby players that were on that ill-fated flight back in the early 70s, I think 1972, that crashed into the Andes on their way between Montevideo in Uruguay and Santiago in Chile. And the plane literally sort of split in half, the wings came off, and they were stuck there in the middle of the mountain. Fast forwarding, there were 16 survivors initially, only 2 ultimately, including Nando, survived the ordeal of 72 days in the end. It took that isolation. But worse than that, there was a film that came out about it called Alive. Yeah. And it was reported, they had to, the only food they could have was from their dead comrades, eating organs. So to be through that ordeal. And the other, because I had a chance after his keynote speaker, it's one of those ones where people were in floods of tears and then roaring with laughter, and then we're just really intently listening. But to me, the overall message from him that's carried me sort of through my career, things can't be that bad. We all have these bridges to cross and challenges, etc. But one of the saddest bits for me, and I'm sorry, I'm probably going on a little bit, but he told this story about his mum and his sister, who didn't really want to go on this rugby trip with him and his mates to watch them win whatever cup it was in South America at the time. But he persuaded them to go. And when that fuselage of the plane split in half, it was him and his friend sitting here with their backsides hanging out of the broken fuselage. They were the last seat that survived, initially survived. And the 2 seats behind him were his mum and his sister. Had gone off and, they perished immediately. And the message was, this was the horrific piece, was that sort of grief and blame, on himself. He found very, very difficult to get over. So the question was, well, how did you get over? And just by persevering. I'm still alive, in their memory. So he's just one of those, and sort of gabbled on again a little bit about it, but he's one of those people that I've met in my life that I felt really, inspired by. He's a successful business person and TV personality and stuff as well now. But we can get through a crisis like this, and as you said earlier, we're all in it together. But I think that strength of resolve to help each other, not eat each other, sorry, but to help each other as we progress is the way to go.
No, that's a really interesting story, John. Thanks for sharing that. There's a couple of questions. Sonny Ridgewell, if the BBG board were to crash in the Andes, who would you eat first? It'd have to be Sonny, wouldn't it? There's more to go around, surely. We'll skip that question. We'll skip that question, John. Okay, Joe Ives, in your opinion, what are the opportunities for new businesses, and in particular, independent professionals who want to enter the UAE market once the restrictions are lifted?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I think we're going to see some interesting restrictions or developments as far as licensing of businesses, cost of doing business in particular, that are being some measures that are being put in place now that will continue, I believe, beyond the recovery. You touched, Greg, earlier on, do people need all this office space? Now, I think there's always going to be a drive to fill the real estate, because that's part of the Dubai model. But as far as individuals having you can't have a Mark Zuckerberg starting up a business if he has to go through all the costs of doing business and taking office space and stuff like that, and not being able to do it out of his back room or his garage. So independent professionals, I think that's a really interesting one, because again, if you look at the BBG survey, the number of sole traders or businesses under 20 employees, they're based here, British owned and based here, but they work regionally. So I think Dubai is going to become even more of a hub in that regard. So any service providers like yourself, Joe, that does that, offers that type of service, I think that will continue way beyond the current crisis.
Yeah, I also think, just to probably add on to that, for a lot of the smaller businesses and independent professionals, I think when everything does get back to a bit more normal, they will actually be able to flourish. They don't have all the big overheads that big corporates will be able to cost cut a little bit more so than the big corporations that are going to have to make revenue up. So actually, when people and businesses are looking for maybe a more cost-effective alternative, those smaller businesses, those independent professionals will actually really flourish, I think, when we do get back to normal.
I agree. And I think there'll be a lot of, sorry interrupting the questions, there's a lot of opportunity in the business advisory space from an M&A perspective, mergers and acquisitions or capital raising. One of the businesses I'm involved with in DIFC, Lumina, Capital Advisors, they're finding they're getting a lot of inquiries from businesses that are thinking, look, we need to shrink or consolidate. So again, from an advisory perspective, I think Dubai has a strong scene.
Fantastic. I've got an actual proper question, which has come through, not about eating any of the board members, but is the BBG just for large corporations looking to be involved with Expo, or would you say there's benefit and equal opportunity for small businesses, small business owners and individuals?
I'm absolutely convinced it's the latter. Okay, UK PLC have done very well. In other words, the big companies have done very well in the build up to Expo so far, whether it be infrastructure, design consultancy, and big UK businesses have won big contracts. What we must ensure is that the smaller businesses get brought into that supply chain opportunity. Otherwise, it can't be delivered. And look, Dubai, UAE is full of these small businesses that can offer that supply chain opportunity. We don't need to bring in more people to do it. So this is the shout out to the big companies. And I'm constantly speaking with whether the big oil companies or the contractors. They have their issues as well. But let's make sure our community of small businesses get that supply chain opportunity. It's a brilliant question and something we should all consider you know, in whatever network we're in, it doesn't have to be so sort of nationalistic as saying, you've got to be British to do it. You know, you're here, you're based in Dubai, you're licensed properly to do your stuff, you're a professional, come in and have, you know, a piece of the action. So supply chain SME for me is the way to go.
Fantastic. Okay, question from Darren Hooker. Given that Saudi are trying to change a more relaxed environment or change to a more relaxed environment, how do you feel that will impact the UAE in the future from a business and tourist perspective? So I guess what he's saying there is that they're relaxing all the rules. There's more opportunity now in Saudi. Do you think that will impact the UAE?
Yeah, Darren, I think, you know, longer term it will be, but that's all about then the UAE having to innovate into perhaps a slightly different model as well. I think it's an interesting question. I haven't done work myself in Saudi, but a number of our members within the group and associates and other businesses have, and that clear, you know, sort of relaxation is, you know, I have to be agnostic politically, but from a personal business opinion, it can only be good that a market is opening in that way. I think in the initial years, it will still be very much, you know, the hub of the region is UAE, and I'd argue, you know, Dubai and Northern Emirates in particular, but UAE is the hub to enable businesses to attract and retain talent here that are then perhaps, you know, working in Saudi until those rules tighten up in the kingdom, where you actually have to be on the ground, which is the sensible way for them to move. So I think there'll be a rebalancing of the, if you like, the economic or commercial power. That's, and again, it's a personal opinion, but we're not going to see anything overnight. I think Dubai has got legs because I think it's, you know, potentially 10 years ahead of any other regional, certainly GCC.
Do they have a BBG in Saudi, John?
Yes. Yeah, they have we here, as well as a BBG, we have a UAE UK Business Council, which as chair of the BBG, I sit on that as well. And that's a group of, sorry, this is for the UAE, I'll come back to the Saudi bit in a second, to encourage bilateral trade between the UK and UAE. And we have very ambitious targets. And that's again back to the whole supply chain opportunity as well as the big companies. There's exactly the same in Saudi, where it's obviously the KSA UK Business Council that feed into a couple of groups. It's not as perhaps well developed just yet from a BBG perspective, but the high level, the holistic level is in place that encourages bilateral trade. And now the business community needs to get together to feed that umbrella organisation. So it's a sort of yes and no answer. There are groups, but it's not perhaps as structured as it is over here. To be fair, we've been over 30 years, running a business group. The BBG is the first licensed business council in the UAE, actually.
Answer. And I'm conscious of time, John, but I do have one question, and it is a really good question to end on. It's from, I don't know this person, maybe you do, Jerry Parks. What are the factors?
Yeah, very well. Yeah. What's he saying?
What are the factors specific to the UAE that you feel may help or hinder us post COVID-19 road to economic recovery?
You just repeat the beginning of that.
Yeah. So what are the factors that are specific to the UAE that will either help or hinder the sort of post COVID-19 road to recovery for us?
Okay, Jerry, I mean, the first thing would be, it's back to my point just then about, infrastructure. What we have in the UAE is the ability to ride that recovery through the infrastructure of communication, transportation, education, medical services, but the whole sort of gamut of services there that already exists as an infrastructure. What we need to be able to do as the business community and the advisory, there's a senior lawyer here. In fact, he's the senior lawyer I met at my first BBG function 21 years ago, that I refer to earlier. So shout out to Jerry Parks. So thanks for that question, Jerry. I think, without being sort of too nebulous about it, it's that whole infrastructure that we already have in place, and that will stand the UAE in its greatest stead. But equally, and I have no doubt that this will be the case, but the local and federal government here have to listen to the business community, and they are, but deliver immediately for some of these small businesses that are struggling now and frankly could collapse very quickly without cash stimulus. So if that's done, then we have the infrastructure to be way ahead of the rest of the region, in my opinion.
Okay, fantastic. Jerry, I hope that answers your question. John, I think we'll wrap it up there. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you for obviously all your insight and everything that you do, obviously for all the British businesses, individuals and SMEs across the UAE. Thank you for answering all the questions. For everybody that's logged on today and taken 45 minutes out of your lunch hour, thank you for tuning in. If you want to watch the repeat of this, it'll be available on the YouTube channel, theglobalnetwork.life. It'll also be on the website. And available on all podcasts as well. So yeah, again, from myself, John, thanks for joining us. And I guess I'll catch you at the next BBG event, which hopefully will not be via Zoom. It will actually be face-to-face.
In person. Yeah, no, thank you all. It's been a pleasure. Thanks very much.
Fantastic. Thanks, everybody. Have a good week and stay safe.
Thanks. See you. Cheers.
Cheers.